Okay, so recording this right after my prequels ones because I care about this topic a lot, and it's a theory this time. But we hear a lot about the will of the Force, and we hear that a lot in the Rogue One movie. What the Force wills and such. And we hear about the diminishing use of the Force into the in the prequels. And then there's the prophecy of balancing out the Force in the prequels. And then there's Disney ruled the balance of the light and the dark. But I don't think that's the balance that we should strive for. And I don't think that's what it should be. Okay, so I gotta slow down and talk clearly because I'm very energetic about this. But in my mind, the balance of the Force isn't equal light and dark. The balance of the Force is it not being used in a negative way. So let's expand upon this. In so which is technically not canon anymore, but it used to be. In the beginning of there was a Sith and Jedi war, and the Jedi won. If the Siths, if Disney's rule of balance was how it was, that shouldn't have happened. The Jedi should have never beaten the Sith, which technically doesn't now, but that was canon. So that's what it used to be. So that's what I'm going to go off of. And because we haven't seen any kind of thing from Disney about the prequels, or pre-prequels. So there was a Jedi and Sith war, Jedi won. So there was only light. So why did that happen? The Jedi shouldn't have been able to win if balance was equal sides dark and light. Why did the Jedi rule for so long if it was dark and light? The Jedi should have lost their powers so much faster than they did. So how did it come to be? The Jedi were turning dark. Now, listen to this, okay? In the prequels, Mace Windu brings up the fact that they are diminishing. They're seeing less in the Force. They're feeling less. Their use of the Force has diminished. Mace Windu's human. Mace Windu couldn't be alive for, I don't know his actual age in canon. We're gonna say 100 years at the oldest. Let's say he's been alive for 100 years. He looks great for 100 years. He's been alive for 100 years. That means he has felt what used to be the Force and is now not. The diminishment. Yoda feels it, which means Yoda knows also what the Force feels like, and now it's diminished, and that it's clouded. Why is it clouded? Darth Sidious is clouding it. He's using his powers of the Force to cloud the vision of the Jedi, to cloud the Force. The Jedi can't use the Force as well because they're not using it how the Force would like it. The Jedi, you see Qui-Gon Jinn use the Force, I think in the best way of all the Jedi. He's following the will of the Force. He's not using it for his own personal gain. He's using it how he should be. You see in the second and the third movie, the Jedi are willing to become these peacekeepers. They fight. In episode 2, you see the Jedi go fight. The Jedi aren't fighters. Hypothetically, following what the Jedi should be, Anakin and Obi-Wan and Padme all die there. Unless the Force willed them to go save them, but it's kind of hard to figure out if it did. Because you get the distress beacon, you see the Jedi, you see the Council talk it out. The Jedi should feel it. Hypothetically, each master should show up there on their own accord from feeling the Force. You see Qui-Gon talk about his feeling in the first movie, and he's trying to teach Obi-Wan how to feel the Force. And feel what the Force wills and what the Force wants to happen. So, going on to my theory. the Force lets the Jedi use its powers less and less because the Jedi are abusing the Force. The Force doesn't want to be used in any kind of way other than what it wills. Anakin is the chosen one. Anakin's going to bring balance to the Force, which he does twice, okay? So in the prequels, he kills off the Jedi Order. He kills a whole bunch of Jedi. The Jedi go into hiding. They're not using the Force for personal gain or for anything out of what is willed upon them. And then you have Darth Sidious, who is the leader now. He's the Emperor. He is in charge. He doesn't need to use the Force. Why use the Force when you're in charge? So then, we're going into the original trilogy. We have Luke following his destiny. He doesn't really use the Force too much. He uses it a little bit, but he's not taught extremely well how to use it, and he doesn't use it outside of saving the galaxy and fighting against evil. Palpatine does use the darkness of the Force. He's trying to convince Luke to come over, which, with the emptiness that the Force is now, is so much more worse. Because when he was originally using the dark side of the Force, there was a whole bunch of Jedi, clouding the Force. Everyone was pulling on the Force to be used, and so Palpatine could easily sneak in and use the Force pretty much undetected, which is why he could make everybody, he clouded everyone's vision. So then Anakin, Darth Vader, once again listening to the Force, which tells him to kill Palpatine, which he does, fulfilling his prophecy of keeping balance to the Force, makes it so the only Jedi alive is Luke. Maybe Leia. I mean, not Leia. Leia's not a Jedi. Leia shouldn't be a Jedi. Leia's not a Jedi. The only Jedi that would be Ahsoka. I don't know what's going to go on with that, but it's just Luke. And Luke, his only guidance from the Force is the Force, so it can tell him what to do. Now, here's where things get tricky. That's the original 6 movies. Going into the 7th and the 8th is where it gets... This theory doesn't work as well. Because Disney has decided that balance is light and dark. Which, by the way, it can still be flipped around because just because a character says something doesn't mean that is. Just because Anakin is told that he's the chosen one doesn't mean he is. But we've seen through his life him fulfill the prophecy. We, the audience, have watched it happen. We, the audience, have watched as Snoke has said there has to be balance. The light rises up to meet the dark, and vice versa. So, as the dark rises up and the light meets it, that's balance of the Force. That means the Force is gray. The Force before was light. And the Jedi are the ones who turned away from what they used to be, which is just purely peacekeepers. But now, Disney is changing it up. And I want Disney to go back. Because, I'll tell you why. If this whole, dark rises up to beat the light, then it doesn't matter who wins or loses. Kylo can win. Okay, so somebody else is going to rise up. Oh, Rey's going to win. Oh, somebody else is going to rise up. You know who was the bad guy in the prequels? Palpatine was the big main villain. Palpatine didn't fight until the 3rd movie. And he didn't fight until he was attacked by the Jedi. We see a fight in the prequels between 2 political parties. Orchestrated by the darkness, but it's not just the darkness. It's not just evil people. They're painted as evil, but if you look at what the Separatists want, they just want to leave the Republic. That shouldn't have to be solved by war, and maybe it wouldn't have been if it wasn't for Palpatine. But that was still a conflict created by not Force people. What we're going to get is conflict caused because the Force wills conflict. Light has to fight the dark. Or what we're gonna get is a gray Jedi, somebody in the middle, which maybe Rey goes that way, maybe Kylo goes that way. Who knows? But I don't want the answer to the balance of the Force to be either A, eternal conflict, or B, gray Jedi. I want the Jedi Order back. Because the Jedi Order stands for peace. The Jedi were peaceful. I'm trying to think of what the quote was, but it's basically the most peaceful person, carries the biggest sword, you know. So you can be the most peaceful and be able to fight and be good at fighting, but it doesn't mean you're not peaceful. That's what the Jedi were. The Jedi were peaceful, but very skilled. Were diplomats, yet could not be defeated by anyone, hypothetically. Going into the ninth movie, I want to see how the Force is handled. I want to see how Rey is handled. The Force is this amazing thing that we don't understand in the movie. We don't understand it at all because it's been different, and it's been this kind of mystical thing that we've seen. Luke's able to deflect bolts using the Force in the original trilogy. And then we go to the prequel trilogy. And what do we see in the Force? We see Anakin, who was made with just his mom and midichlorians, using of the Force. We see the Jedi meditating and searching for answers in the Force, looking for guidance, which means the Force has guided them. The Force has been this mythical thing that we don't know how it shifts. And the prequels are looking to establish some kind of normity of this is how the Force works, but it shouldn't. The Force can be this mystical thing. We don't need to understand the Force. The Force is supposed to be this thing we don't really get because we're not Jedi. We don't. It's a feeling, and feelings are hard to explain, and that's kind of the point. We don't need numbers for feelings, and the Force is just a feeling. We don't need to be told that it works in a certain way. We need to be told that they're feeling it. I've got a bad feeling about this. Iconic line. That's the Force. The Force is a feeling. Just, I love Star Wars. While we're still on the Force, what I really want to see going forward, I want to see people who are Force sensitive, but not Jedi or Sith. I don't know if anyone's heard of Force sensitive. It's supposed to be basically you're kind of connected with the Force, but you don't really use it. You just kind of get like an inkling, Like supposedly a lot of some clone troopers from the show Star Wars: The Clone Wars had it. Rex dodges bullets or dodges laser beams, and that's because he kind of has a feeling through the Force. Supposedly, the theory I've heard, which would be interesting because it gives a lot more weight. It makes characters seem a lot more intimidating when they have this kind of feeling of the Force. And it doesn't just make the Jedi or Sith these badasses that can only die to one another. It makes them vulnerable, makes them more easy to relate to because we as people are vulnerable and we feel. I'm not always able to tell somebody how I feel. I'm just feeling it, and that's the idea of the Force. It's not a number, it's not a color. It's not this thing that's perfectly balanced. It's a feeling. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Force. kind of jumbled up. I am enjoying doing these rants though. And I'm probably gonna upload this right after my prequel one. Go check that out if you haven't. I know I'm gonna watch this over again. But yeah, thanks for sticking around.